Throughout my journey in any business endeavor that I did, in anything I did in life, I was always going to pour my heart into it and empty my tank. But everything that I had, and that took me very far away.
我應該冇啲面嚟咧，我3塊多啊個，你冇以為就有嘅啊？
Hi, I'm Jesse Itzler. I've had a very unconventional journey as an entrepreneur. I started as a kiddie pool attendant. I sold carrot and celery sticks door to door. That failed. I had a t-shirt company. Failed. Marketing company failed. Record label went out of business. I had all these businesses in my 20s that failed. And then when I was 28 years old, I was a guest on a private jet. And when I walked onto the private plane, it was like the scene in The Wizard of Oz, when everything in life goes from black and white to color. I was like, people fly like this? I want to fly like this. And by the time we landed the airplane, my partner and I were like, let's start a private jet company so when we travel, we can fly in private planes. I was like, definitely. Except we had no airplanes and we had no experience. But we started a company called Marquis Jet. They went on to do over $5 billion in sales, and ultimately we sold it to Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway's NetJets division. I then was part of a coconut water company called Zico Coconut Water, which we sold to Coca-Cola. I had a fitness company, an endurance company called 29029, which we sold to iFit. And when I was starting out, I had a company called Alphabet City, which we sold to a public company called SFX. But I had an unfair advantage. I was mentored personally by a billionaire. And he literally gave me the cheat code for not just business, but also for life. And today, I'm going to share with you this exact cheat code, the secrets and tips that he gave me that helped me not just in business, but also in life. But first, a little bit about this billionaire. So I learned about this billionaire in a story that's relatively unknown from a book that I read. And it's the story of a family from about 100 years ago from Russia. And this family was so poor, they had 12 kids, that 6 of the children died before the age of 2. So the father decided to move from Russia to the United States of America to give his children a better life. And one by one, he sent for the kids. And when the last child was sent to this country, he had lice in his hair, young boy. So they tarred his head, burnt his scalp. He had to wait till he healed, ultimately landed in the USA, got recruited to the army when he got a little bit older for World War I, where he was mustard gassed in action. He was missing in action for about 6 days. They found him in a hospital where he got a medical discharge and moved back to the United States, where he settled down, met a woman, got married, and had 3 children. 2 girls and a boy. The boy became the billionaire. Now, I was lucky. I met this guy, this billionaire, when he was 40 years old and in his absolute prime, and was able to spend a lot of time with this man who ultimately shared the lessons and the tips that I'm about to share with you right now, the cheat code. So for starters, he taught me that there's 2 sides to business. There's the business side, the financial side, which is obviously so important. We tend to over-index in the energy we put into the financial side. But then there's the spiritual side. What kind of culture do we build? Were we kind to our customers? Were we philanthropic? And sometimes we tend to neglect this side. If you have $1 billion and your spirit is 0, $1 billion times 0 is 0. The name of the game that we're all playing if we're in business is to get enough of this, the financial side, whatever enough is for you, without sacrificing or compromising this. And as I became an entrepreneur, that lesson became very valuable to me. to focus and concentrate, not just on the financial side of business, but also on the spiritual side. If something didn't feel right to me while I was doing it, spiritually, I wasn't going to do it. He taught me that one of the most important things that you can do in business is to care the most. He told me that only one person can be the richest, only one person can be the funniest, only one person can be the best looking, but anybody can care the most. And he told me that if you poured your soul into everything that you do, if you literally empty the tank, that your customers and people around you will feel that. He said that customers feel soul, and that you can't outsource soul, and that soul doesn't live on a spreadsheet. But if you show that emotion and that passion and that enthusiasm, it's going to leak through, and people are going to respond to that. So throughout my journey, in any business endeavor that I did, in anything that I did in life, I was always going to pour my heart into it, to empty my tank, and put everything that I had, pour my soul into it. And that took me a very far way. He taught me that skills are important, but those can be taught. But it's attitudes that are truly what matter the most. Your enthusiasm, your passion, honesty, integrity, those aren't skills that you learn in business. Those are attitudes that we all have. And he would say to me, like, even if you don't have the greatest skill, you have these attitudes. We all have these attitudes. And if we over-index in that, if we ooze the right attitudes out of our pores, then again, amazing things are going to happen. He taught me about relationships, and he had a secret formula, and he gave me that formula to building deep, meaningful, impactful relationships. And that was to compliment, to congratulate, and to console. What does that mean? Well, he would call people up and be like, Jesse, I just want to let you know you're an unbelievable dad. I love the way you parent. As a friend of yours for so long, as a mentor, it's so inspiring to watch the way you raise your kids. And he would just tell me that if you did that at a time where nobody else was doing it, and you reached out to somebody and you authentically complimented them on something that really matters to you, they won't forget it. He told me to congratulate. If something good happens to someone, hey Jesse, I heard your son got into Duke University. If my kid got into Duke University, I'd be on cloud 9. My family, myself, we are on cloud 9 for you and your family, and he told me to console. I actually had one of the worst things that could happen to a parent happen to me. I got a knock on my door. The next day it was my friend Dougie Fresh, the rapper. I said to him, Doug, what are you doing here? He said, when you get news like that, you don't call, you show up. If you have somebody in your life that's grieving and they don't reach out to you, you'll never forget it, ever. So a crazy thing happened. I started doing it. I started complimenting, congratulating, consoling. And after several years, I started getting the magic word. I would get a referral. And when my business took a downtick, people could stick with me. Business can be transactional, but relationships can't. And when you build deep, authentic, meaningful relationships by pouring your soul into what it is that you're doing, the floodgates open. The floodgates open. He told me one time the importance of ripping up the playbook. Like, my wife always says the same thing, that if nobody taught you how to do your job, how would you do it? If no one taught you how to go after your customers, how to send referral notes, what your business card should look like, how would you do it? That's where innovation comes from. That's where disruption comes from. That's where separation from your competition comes from. And throughout my journey as an entrepreneur, one of the greatest gifts that I had is I didn't have a lot of experience. So it guaranteed that everything I did would look differently from my competition. And that was a huge asset and a very impactful lesson. He taught me the simple blueprint for life, and I saw it one day on his wall. It was a creed that he wrote. I saw it on his office wall. It was a blueprint I stuck with for my entire life. It said, be good to your friends, loyal to your family, true to your convictions, and beat the shit out of your enemies. And that's always something that I remembered along my journey, because you're gonna get a lot of enemies, and don't be scared to step on their throat when you get the chance to do it. But most importantly, he taught me to believe in the end of my story. That if there was only one person that could get the job, you have to believe it's gonna be you. If you're single, you have to believe that he or she's out there. You have to believe in your end of the story. Because if you don't believe in the end of your story, who else will? And again, as I became an entrepreneur, these lessons ran through my blood. They were in my ear. It was almost like I had Yoda talking to me. But the most important thing that I learned from this billionaire was how he showed up for his family. He never missed a dinner. He showed up at every event. He worked 6.5 days of his life every week and still managed to go to everything. This man died on March 21st, 2022. He had a wife of 68 years. He had 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. One daughter owned a retail store. The son became a lawyer. The other daughter, an entrepreneur. And the billionaire's youngest son, that's me. My dad never had great financial success, but he mastered the spiritual side. And as I said before, if you have $1 billion and your spirit is 0, $1 billion times 0 is 0. But if you have $1, and your spirit is $1 billion, $1 times $1 billion is $1 billion. My dad was a spiritual billionaire. And for 54 years, I got advice from this man. Some of which I share with you above, some of which I'm keeping inside. But one of the greatest lessons I got from my father was the last lesson. It was the biggest lesson. And it came 2 years after his death, when my mother died shortly after. 2 years after. I got a call from my brother, and well, for those that don't know, when your parents died, we decided to sell my parents' house. The process is different. They bring in an estate person, and they go through the house, and everything has to go. Either it gets donated, it gets sold, or it goes to storage. And they went through every single item, 92 years of items in my parents' house, until they got to the last section with just a bunch of books. And I got a call from my brother. I was living in Atlanta, they were in Florida, that we have a situation. I said, what's that? He said, well, the guy here that's going through the books went through one of the books, but it's not a book. When they opened it up, it was hollow, and it was a safe. I said, what are you talking about? He said, there's nothing in the book, it's a safe. I said, well, what is in there? He said, well, there's a little bit of money, there's some credit cards, but there's a note. I said, well, what does the note say? It says, if anything ever happens to me, here's the combination to a safe. You're the only one that has the contents. Get what's in the safe out. And I'm thinking, oh my God, Mom left us Apple stock at like $1. This is unbelievable. What's the address in the safe? So he tells me the address, and as it turns out, it was my summer house in Connecticut. A house that I rarely ever go to, but I was going to 2 weeks later for Labor Day. So when I went there, I opened up the safe, and in the safe were a couple of items that I had placed there, and one thing that I forgot that had been placed there by my father, and that was the book from the beginning of this story. After 90 years on Earth, and all the things my father went through and my grandfather went through, everything was sold. The only thing was left is this one book, the book in the safe. And it made me think, my dad, man, after all these years, was still giving me a lesson, but this one was the most powerful one. At the end of the day, the only thing that you have left is your story. That's it. Everything else gets sold off or is gone. And if all you have left is your story, then damn, why won't you make that the best story you could possibly ever make it? By doing the best you could do with business, by doing the best you could do on the spiritual side, and leaving your family or friends the gift of an amazing life and an amazing story. If you are listening to this, you really have one job, and that's to live a life that you can leave a legacy where people can hear your story and be inspired, the same way my dad left a story and a legacy for me that's going to carry on from generation to generation.
each one of us has a destiny. Each one of us is called to do something. Each one of us has a unique set of characteristics and skills. The question is, are we brave enough to reach it? Are we brave enough to put ourselves out there and take it?
I'm in Annapolis, Maryland. I'm about to give a talk to 1,000 freshmen at the U.S. Naval Academy. How do we think about courage? How do we apply it? It's not just the courage on the battlefield, but the courage to follow your destiny in life, the courage to be your best, the courage to do the right thing, the courage to stand up for what you believe in. That's the kind of courage I want to talk about in my talk today at the Naval Academy, which I'm very excited to do. It's been a great honor to be a fellow and to be associated with the Stockdale Center here at the U.S. Naval Academy, Stockdale being one of our most recent and greatest stoic figures, actually as he's parachuting down into Vietnam, knowing he's going to be killed or taken prisoner.
Pokemon Unite!
And entering the world of Epictetus. So I'm hoping to bring Epictetus and Seneca and Marcus Aurelius to all the midshipmen and women here at the U.S. Naval Academy. It's been a great honor. I'll show you some of that talk now.
Good evening, Commandant, distinguished guests, class of 2024. I'm excited to introduce your speaker for this evening's stunt lecture. This ethics lecture series is made possible by a generous gift to the Leaders to Serve the Nation campaign by William C. Stutt, a member of the Naval Academy class of 1949, and his wife, Caroline. Hey, few writers have done more to bring ancient times, wisdom, and cutting-edge marketing strategies together than Ryan Holiday. By age 33, his philosophically driven best-selling books have sold over 4 million copies and spent more than 200 weeks on bestseller lists. His books are taught in colleges and marketing programs around the world, including Trust Me, I'm Lying, which revealed the massive vulnerabilities and opportunities in the global media system in 2012. He has directly influenced Super Bowl winning teams like the New England Patriots, NBA champions like the San Antonio Spurs, and Olympic gold medalists, as well as sitting senators, military leaders, and some of the biggest and most important companies in the world, like Google, Twitter, and Microsoft. Please join me in welcoming ACT Year 2023 Great Fellow for Virtue Ethics, Mr. Ryan Holiday.
It's an honor to be with all of you tonight. I want to start with a story of Naval Academy graduate, one Jimmy Carter here, class of 46. I'm going to say a lot of those, so you're going to have to do that a lot. Here he is with his wife now of 75 years, Roskin. He graduates, he enters the submarine service, and then he secures the opportunity of a lifetime in 1952, and he is set to interview Admiral Rickover. Now, Admiral Rickover is not just one of America's great immigrant success stories, one of its great naval success stories, one of its most brilliant minds. He's, of course, the father of the nuclear navy. He is also one of the most hands-on leaders in American history. In fact, he not only tests every submarine before it goes out into service, but he interviews every single candidate for the submarine service, including a young Jimmy Carter. And as he interviews young Carter, it's a long 2-3 hour interview. They talk about strategy, they talk about tactics, they talk about physics, they talk about literature. And Carter had prepared over and over and over again for this interview. And it seems to be going well, and Rickover asks him, he says, how did you stand in your class at the Naval Academy? And he puffs up his chest, he beams with pride, and he says, I was 59th in a class of more than 800. And Rickover, who's never one to be particularly impressed with grades, asks him, did you always do your best? And Carter goes instinctively to answer, yes, of course, I did my best, as we all would like to think that we do. But then something inside of him catches, and he thinks for a second, and he thinks about the workouts that he posted through. He thinks about the classes that he didn't always take seriously, when he coasted on natural talents, when he was satisfied with being in the middle of the pack or not getting a perfect score, when he ignored opportunities for extra credit, when he didn't do all the required reading but just got the gist of it. And then he looks at Rickover and he says, no, sir, I did not always do my best. And that's when Rickover hits him with a question that would change Carter's life. He says, why not? And then he signals that the interview is over and he leaves the room. And this question would haunt Jimmy Carter for the rest of his life. Why didn't I always do my best? And of course, a positive expression of that, which is, am I doing my best. In fact, one of his first books, his campaign memoir when he runs for governor of Georgia, is titled Why Not the Best? And so this question is the guiding question of Carter's life. Am I giving my best? Am I doing hard? Am I doing trying? Now, the reason this question is so haunting is the truth is we don't always do our best, and there is usually something more that we could give. I think about this in my own life. Unlike many of the prestigious speakers who have graced this stage, I don't think most of my teachers in high school would have predicted I would be here. I would get close to something as elite as the Naval Academy. And when I think back as to why that was, why I was a late bloomer in that sense, I think I was afraid. I was afraid of really trying. I was afraid of really doing my best, really reaching for something. My parents had somewhat low expectations. I internalized those somewhat low expectations. But there was a safety. My mentor, the great writer Robert Greene, he said that teenagers, but I think this is true for all of us, we strike a somewhat paradoxical place. We're lackadaisical and rebellious. It's a way of staying in place. Because if we try hard, if we do our best, if we put ourselves all the way out there, it brings an increased risk of failure. And then when we fail, right, it says something about us. And since we can't handle the thought of that, since we are afraid of that, we almost celebrate slacking off, we celebrate irony, we celebrate holding back. We say, I don't really want to do this, I don't want to be like those people, I don't want to go all the way. Waste that sort of middle attitude. And this is a dangerous thing because it deprives the world not just of great people, but it also deprives us of the unique ability of realizing full potential, which is entirely unique. Every single one of you has a unique set of experiences, a unique set of talents, totally unique DNA code that never has been. And so to try, right, to be brave enough to put yourself fully out there is to risk failing, and to risk failing is to risk shame, criticism, and most of all, and I think it took an immense amount of courage on Carter's part to embrace, to accept it. The courage to try, it's funny, the irony is we don't try because we think we risk failure, and that failure changes for ourselves. But the irony is in doing your best, actually putting everything out there is that the greatest protection, especially when you don't control outcomes. Obviously, you guys have a certain amount of pride, and yet he's not really anyone's favorite president. He's not the medium opinion of what in fact he thinks he's one of the great American presidents. I think he deserves to be up there with Truman. But what to me is great about Carter and why I tell this story is that it is the ultimate protection. Now, I actually think that one of Carter's greatest achievements, one of the places that he sees furthest ahead, and we're seeing this now play out in the field, is that Carter, when he wins the presidency in '76, decides he sees that America is dangerously dependent on foreign energy. And he starts to see what we now call climate change as well. And he has a remarkable economic foresight. He gives one of his most famous speeches where he says, America needs a moral equivalent of war to combat climate change and to combat foreign energy dependence. And how would most people react to this? Excellent. He puts solar panels on the roof of the White House in the 70s, right? How ahead of its time was that? And the first thing Ronald Reagan does, he takes the presidency, is repair those panels. Right? Carter was remarkably ahead of his time, with an amazing foresight. And had we listened then, who knows where the future would be now? Who knows the position America and the free world would be had we taken those active steps, which Carter was uniquely familiar with due to his time with Rick Wilson, right? So I tell all this because obviously we have very much business and we celebrate with Carter. The policy fails. But this is where Rickover and the idea of doing your best comes back in. Rickover says that he has no doubt that the public will ultimately understand and see Carter as a far-seeing man with intended to protect the people of the U.S. And he says that all great ideas have been seen as failure when they are too early. But this is the key part, and this is the idea of a stern taskmaster like Rickover. That as long as you're trying as hard as you can to do things right, you have a success. So it may be that you do your best. It may be that you put everything into something. It may be that you are totally and 100% But if you have done that, you can sit quietly in a room alone, knowing you can sleep soundly, right? If you've done your best, you know there is nothing else you can do. So yes, there is some risk in trying to put yourself out there. But to me, that risk is far less scary than the risk of knowing that you left something on the table. You could have been better. You could have been better. And so when we think about this idea of doing our best, we're going to talk about courage. That courage being the first important part of it. Courage, temperance, justice, wisdom. This is a sign of it. I pass by multiple times a day. Courage represented by the Now, I wouldn't deign to speak to you much about physical courage, but I want to talk about courage. To me, courage is kind of like a gem. You look at it from different angles, and each angle, each slice of it gives you a better sense of this complicated thing. Because courage isn't one thing, it doesn't only exist this way or look this way. It is, in fact, many things. There's, of course, physical courage, right? This is the courage of a soldier. This is the courage of a pilot. This is the courage of a firefighter running into a burning building. Police officer is a courageous person who risks themselves and their physical safety in certain matters. And then there's moral courage, the courage of the whistleblower, the pioneering scientist, the barrier breaker. Now, it is long to know that these two kinds of courage are very different, and they are different, they appear different, but I would argue that they are also the same. At their core, they're about putting your ass on the line, putting yourself out there, risking something for something, right? Risking one's reputation, risking one's life. Sometimes those things can feel like the same, but the idea is that courage is that risk, that putting yourself out there. It seems pretty simple, but we'll get into why this is a little more complicated. But putting your ass on the line, literally or figuratively, that's what I want to define courage as tonight. Florence Nightingale, she's born in Florence, born to a rich Victorian family. She has everything she could possibly want. No pressure, no expectations. In fact, she's not expected to do anything but get married and throw parties. But from an early age, she has this independence streak. I read a beautiful book about Florence Nightingale, and marked up this drawing that I love. This is a drawing that one of her aunts did of Florence Nightingale as a young girl. She said, "Here is Florence independently stumping along." So, right, her sister, who's older, has to hold the hand of an adult, but Florence is braver than that. She puts herself out there. And so it's fitting that when she's about 16 years old, she hears a voice that says she should do something with her life. She feels called to nursing specifically, but stuff gets in the way. Her parents say, "Why would you ever do something like that? Why would you associate with these people? It was considered low, it was considered risky, it was considered the need for social station." And so for many years, she ignores this call. For 8 years, in fact. She doesn't reach out, she doesn't achieve the destiny, she doesn't put herself out there. Not doing her best, she doesn't put herself out there. She's scared, right? Fear being the opposite of courage in that way. And then 8 years into this, ignoring the call, she gets it again. She says, are you going to let reputation hold you back from service? Her parents at one point say, we'd rather you be a prostitute than a nurse. The idea that she would go out there and do something, she would take care of these people, it was anathema to her social class. And her answer to this question, as it is for many of us, was yes. She was going to let what people think hold her back from service. If you're familiar with the idea of the hero's journey, this is in fact part of the hero's journey. You live in the ordinary world, you get the call to adventure, and what comes next is the What's remarkable, what's tragic about Florence Nightingale is that she 16 years. For 16 years, the call falls on deaf ears because she's afraid of what other people think. She feels she's not trained. She feels like she's not being supported. She feels like it's impossible. She feels like no individual can possibly make a difference. This idea that each one of us has a destiny, each one of us is called to do something, each one of us has a unique set of characteristics and skills. The question is, are we brave enough to reach it? Are we brave enough to put ourselves out there and take it? The problem is that stuff gets in the way. My friend Stephen Pressfield, who wrote Gates of Fire, who's a Marine, he says that the thing that gets in the way between us and our heart, we talk about this a lot of practice, this is the stuff that gets between us and our heart and our destiny and our calling to cause resistance. And sometimes it's what people think, sometimes it's all the reasons why it's really difficult, sometimes it's a lack of resources, sometimes it's a lack of time, sometimes it's just pure procrastination. That resistance gets in the way, and it holds us back. Winston Churchill says there comes a time in all of our lives when something figuratively taps us on the shoulder. It's a chance to do a very special thing, unique to us, fitted to our unique talents. He says what a tragedy it is if in that moment we are unprepared or unqualified for what could have been our finest hour. And that very well could have been Florence Nightingale's story. Pat Tillman, who leads a fantastic career in the NFL to join the Army Rangers, says somewhere inside we hear a voice. A voice leads us in a direction, a person we wish right? The hero's journey, the call to adventure, the call to greatness, the call to destiny, the call to make your mark in history. Florence Nightingale ignores it for a long time, and that could be seen as tragic, or we could see it as a 16-year process of girding herself up, stealing her will, because when she finally decides to break with her family, when she decides to do it, it's a transformation like that. She says, I must expect no sympathy or help. I must take something, as little as I can, to enable me to live. I must take it, and it will not be given to me, right? Your destiny isn't this thing that people give you. It's something that must be seized, that must be taken, must be fulfilled. To seek that destiny, to become that person, it may be disruptive, it may be judged, it may be a break with this or that, but it's not selfish, and in fact, self-lift. As one of the great poems by Longfellow about Florence Nightingale says, we need these people, the people that lift us up when we are low, who dare greatness, who inspires us and calls us to become what we are capable of. And in those field hospitals in Crimea, and later all over the world, Florence Nightingale essentially pioneered the concept of modern nursing and finally you're more likely to die of disease than of a battlefield. When the worst thing that could happen to you would be to go to the hospital. The thing that people said wouldn't work. It said it was lowly. In fact, rises up a generation of people, a generation of women in our transformation. But we need this kind of courage. We need this kind of courage to seize that destiny, to become that thing that only we are capable of becoming, regardless of what others think. And this is Marcus Aurelius. If I could take you back to 165 AD, the Antonine Plague hits Rome. It makes Rome look like a walk in the park. It's actually brought back to Rome from the far flungs of the empire by soldiers returning home from war, and it ripples through the Roman Empire. It overwhelms the treasury, it overwhelms public health, it overwhelms the cities. Millions of people die. And that was the only crisis of Marcus Aurelius' reign. It would have been hard enough, but in fact he also deals with historic flooding, the Tiber River floods, once in a generation floods, then there's invasion borders that she's forced to dispatch, and then just all the ordinary problems of running a empire. It's one thing one ancient historian, Cassius Dio, says that Marcus does not have the good fortune that he deserved. Almost his whole reign was involved in a series of troubles. And we can see Marcus staggering under the weight of all of this. And yet he writes in Meditations, his classic book, perhaps one of the greatest books ever written. He says, it's unfortunate that this happened. And he catches himself and says, no, it's fortunate that it happened to me, right? Because he was brave enough to deal with it, because he was strong enough to deal with it, because he had trained for exactly this. So this question of, is it unfortunate or fortunate? This is the one thing that we get to decide. This is our choice. Marcus Aurelius writes in Meditations that our actions can be repeated, stuff can go wrong, we can find ourselves in difficult situations, but we can always convert and adapt these circumstances to our own acting. He says the impediment to action advances action, it stands in the way becomes the way. This is my book, The Obstacle is the Way. The idea being that stuff happens, but this stuff is also an opportunity. Stoics believe that in any and all situations, no matter how undesirable or unexpected or unfortunate, there contains inside them an opportunity to practice virtue or arete, to be our best, to do our best. Perhaps not in the way that we intended, perhaps not in the way that we were chosen, but an opportunity nevertheless. Right after the invasion of Normandy, the Allies face a massive counteroffensive. The tanks are bogged down in the hedgerows of France. Eisenhower calls all of his generals into the field headquarters and he says, look, the present situation is to be regarded as opportunity and not disaster. He says, I only want to see cheerful faces around this conference table. To me, this is what leadership is. The decision to see it as fortunate, not unfortunate. To see it as an opportunity, to step up, to be a leader. Right? And in fact, if you're familiar with the Follies Pocket, and then later, the Battle of the Bulge, this is Eisenhower seeing that in the midst of this enormous counteroffensive, if they can bend and not break, if they can absorb it, if they can encircle it, it's actually a massive strategic opportunity that, as overwhelming as the threat was, it was also a strategic blunder by the Nazis. So the idea to have the control to step up to be the leader when everyone else is rattled, when everyone else is scared, this is what courage is about. And this kind of courage is contagious. But that means stepping up. It means making hard decisions, and there are no easy decisions. Not in leadership, not in life, right? The easy decisions get taken by everyone else beneath you. Dean Acheson, the Secretary of State under Truman, he says at the top there are no easy choices. All are between evils, consequences, which judge. Each of you as leaders are going to have to make decisions that are not clear, that are not easy. If they were easy and clear and obvious and the outcome was guaranteed, never would have made it easy. Right? So leadership, you can imagine Marcus Aurelius, the head of this empire, is overwhelmed by this thing. The enormity of the decisions that he's having to make over and over again. Imagine Eisenhower off the coast of France deciding, is the weather going to hold? Are we going to go or not? Right? Writing a little note to himself to be opened in case the invasion is failure. Right? This is the kind of decision that leaders have to make. This is what strength is. This is what courage is about. Make those hard decisions. Right? So Marcus Aurelius has to do this over and over again, hard decisions. But it's also the choice of his faith. The obstacle is the way. That same historian Cassius Dio says that Marcus didn't have the good fortune that he deserved. His whole reign was beset by a series of troubles. But he said, I, for my part, admired him all the more for this very reason, that amid usual, extraordinary difficulties, he both survived himself. Right? So the fact that it is hard, the fact that it's difficult, the fact that it is one obstacle after the other is in fact an opportunity for greatness. If you are brave enough to step up and do your best. General Mattis talks about his idyllic childhood in Washington. And he says the greatest gift that his parents gave him was that they introduced he and his siblings to a world of ideas. He said, not a fearful place, but a place to enjoy. And this is what instills in him a lifelong love of learning in his books. He says in his memoir, this is an important line, I remember he said, if you haven't read hundreds of books about what you do, you are functionally illiterate. You will be incompetent because your own experiences are not broad enough to sustain you. He says people have been doing what you do for thousands thousands of years, and you best learn from their experiences. Any fool can learn by experience, was the expression. Better to learn by the experiences of others. But I would push back on General Madison. It's not that the world of ideas is a fun or pleasant place. There is a certain amount of scariness. If it wasn't scary, everyone would live there. The fact that they don't. The world of ideas is a dangerous place. Truth is a scary thing. This is why so many of us avert our gaze from it. The pursuit of knowledge is not for the faint of heart. It itself demands a certain amount of courage and fearlessness. There's an expression I love. If history doesn't make you uncomfortable, you are not studying history. You are reading and consuming something quite different. Right? If you only look for stuff that you agree with, that makes you feel smart, that confirms what you already know, again, you are not engaging fearlessly with the world of ideas. If you only look for things that are simple, that don't make your brain hurt, again, you are doing it wrong. You are doing it wrong if the world of ideas isn't challenging, isn't uncomfortable, isn't unpleasant, isn't perhaps impossible to fully wrap your head or your arms around. It is supposed to be a challenge. None of us are so smart that we can just grasp it, we can just get it. It is a lifelong journey. Seneca, one of my favorite Stoic philosophers, says, in fact, that we must read like a spy in the enemy's camp. Seneca writes letters from a Stoic. He's a Stoic philosopher. And yet the philosopher he quotes most in his letters is Epicurus, his rival. Right? He says, I will quote a bad author if the line is good. Right? He says, be like a spy in the enemy's camp. Actively seek out things that you disagree with, that challenge you, that make you uncomfortable, right? That are contrary to what you've been taught, contrary to what you wish to be true. Seek out challenging and unpleasant ideas. Epictetus, another Stoic philosopher, says it is impossible to learn that which you think you already know. So again, it should be challenging. It should be making you feel humble and small. It shouldn't just be that you read hundreds of books. You should read hundreds of books, some of them several times. Heraclitus says, no man steps in the same river twice. I'm on an active journey myself to now go reread books that I read at your age, now for a second time, now with more experience under my belt, now with a greater breadth of knowledge under my belt, now with current events as they are. The books are the same, I am different, right? The world is different. And so when we step into these ideas, into these debates, into these questions, they are never ending, they are infinite, and they should always be challenging us. The less you think you know, the more you can learn. Why is Socrates considered so wise? Why is he so brilliant? Because he did not think he was brilliant. He did not think he was wise. And he fearlessly asked questions. Socrates didn't go around Greece telling people what he knew. He went around Athens asking questions, getting in uncomfortable discussions, challenging what he thought he knew, challenging other people's foundational questions and premises. So knowledge and truth is an uncomfortable thing. It is a balance, that is reason. This is Tiger Woods. You may have seen him in the Masters this weekend. I think it's fascinating to consider that 3 times Tiger Woods' career, at the top of his game, in each one of those situations, he reinvented his swing entirely. And now he is trying to reinvent his golf game again in light of the horrific injuries that he has suffered. So there's a great expression that all growth is a leap in the dark, right? Because at the top of the game, he has to reinvent his swing. In between those two places is an uncomfortable valley, a dark hallway, where you don't know if you're getting out, where you don't know if you're getting better, where you don't know if it's making a difference. And again, if you're in this, you have a faint heart, you will not make it. If you need other people to be validated for you, if you need extra people, so it's always, if you are not just satisfied with doing your best, you will not make it from point A to point B. You will not get across that chasm. Florence Nightingale says she would rather die 10 times in service, inheriting a way to rule than stand high on time. Right? The courage to not be complacent, to always focus on growing, on new things, on seeking out these new challenges. This is critical. Are you willing to look foolish? Epictetus says, if you wish to be content to seen as foolish or ignorant about some things. If you can't do that, if you are too fragile, you will not go, you will not grow. Can you admit what you don't know? Again, can you be willing to ask questions? Can you seek out new teachers, new ways of doing things? Can you do this fearlessly? Can you do this despite, again, the raised eyebrows, can you embrace change and disruption? Because these are the only constants in life. John Wheeler, the physicist, the inventor of the hydrogen bomb, he said, as that is the perpetual journey. As you get better, as you become more successful, as you work your way up the ranks, what you will find so again, if you're in this to feel good, if you're in this to be content, you think graduation is some moment, it's an ongoing journey. You have to stay a student, you have to seek out that disruptive teaching. So let's go back to Marcus Aurelius. We can again imagine him staggering under the weight of one crisis after another. And yeah, he tried to tell himself it was fortunate that he was better him than someone else, but it would have been impossible for him not to struggle, not to feel like he was falling short. And he writes in meditation not to be ashamed to ask for help. He says, like soldiers storming a wall, we have a mission to accomplish. And if you've been wounded and need a comrade to pull you up, he says, so it's not just the putting on a brave face, it's not just pushing forward. Courage is also asking for help. This is a little book I like to read to my young children. It's called The Boy, the Fox, the Horse, and the Mole. And it says, asking for help isn't giving up. It is refusing to give up, right? You don't get help, you're too afraid to ask for it, right? You don't get help if you don't ask for it. And if you are afraid to do this, again, you will not become what you are capable of becoming. Are you brave enough to be vulnerable? Do you let people in? This is Brene Brown's question. Daring greatly is not just seeking ambitious goals, but can you be vulnerable, can you be open to let people in, collaborate, connect as a human being. The last year is going to be very hard. And the next year is going to be very hard. Life is hard. Being a leader is hard. And it's lonely. Sometimes you can't make it on your own. You're not supposed to make it on your own, right? That's the whole point. And no one should be seen as unbreakable. Nancy Sherman, who was an instructor here for many years, one of the writing teacher about Stoicism and wrote Stoic Orders, she talks about how we get the concept of Stoicism wrong. There's a difference between uppercase Stoicism and lowercase Stoicism. Lowercase Stoicism means has no emotions, never feels anything, is a machine, is the prototypical warrior who's not the room. Hemingway in A Farewell to Arms, he says, if you bring so much courage into this world, the world has to kill you to break you. And it will kill you. He says the world breaks every one of us. Afterwards, we can become strong in the broken places. But those who will not break, it kills. Right? If you think that you are too strong to ask for help, if you are above it, eventually stop it.
啊，你不要扔掉，那是我装卡片的东西。
这个跟桌子一样。
桌子对，有装卡片在里面。如果我卖卡片，是我去那个卡片专门拍卡片的地方要用。那我没车，那我要带去。
Audie Murphy, the most decorated soldier in American history, he writes in his memoirs from Helen Mack. Last lines, he says, "Life faces us, and I swear to myself that I will measure up to it." He says, "I may be branded by war, but I will not be defeated by it." Hemingway himself says it's defeated and destroyed are not the same thing. We can be defeated, but we choose if we're destroyed. We choose if we can't be resilient enough to come back, to ask for help, to collaborate, to be vulnerable enough to where we push those. This is Harry. way to destroying possibilities to change. It's been a fun ride watching the guy. He doesn't take the vaccine, misses most of the season, drives away James Harden, says, I'm doing this best for the vaccine. Someone should probably remind him that life is a team sport. Society is a team sport. Maybe it's a team sport. America is a team sport. What this is, right? And as we think about courage, it wasn't so simple, just putting your ass in the line. Kyrie has put himself in his ass in the line. Of course, it's cost him millions of dollars. It's damaged his reputation. It's subjected him to endless amounts of criticism. He's lost most of how many seasons will we get, right? So he is taking a stand, and you might think that that's what courage is about, taking a stand. But it's more complicated than that. Courage is putting your ass on the line. For what? Where Byron says, "'Tis the cause makes all that degrades or hallows courage in its fall." So the courage to risk your career, your reputation, championship millions of dollars, to become a vector for the virus and people. I mean, there are service members in the Navy right now that are hindering America's military preparedness for that very right, to be a vector of a disease that has killed 1 million people, that up until very recently was killing us. Courage is not just risking, but what are you risking that? And of course, Kyrie should probably check some of the other. I contrast that courage with Dr. Catalin Carrico. She comes to America. She's an immigrant from Hungary. She escapes communism with $900 stuffed in her daughter's teddy bear. She works for almost 30 years in the bowels of academia. She never makes more than $60,000 a year. Her work is constantly questioned. She has to fight with every training grant. She has to constantly reapply for her job. Everyone thinks her line of inquiry is pointless, that it's not going anywhere, that she's chasing the dead end. And it wasn't until 2020 when suddenly people thought she seems to be vaccine research. And she becomes perhaps the most important scientist of her generation, like that. Many years of doubt, many years of risk, many years of questioning, content to do her best, content to show up each day and do it and not care about anything else. So it's about what you risk your reputation or your body for, of course. This is Franklin Buchanan, Matthew Mori, heroes who are naval academy. You can imagine it was risky to give up everything, to give up your appointments, to risk death in the U.S. Civil War. For what cause did they choose to do that? The worst cause that you could possibly imagine. And they were immensely courageous to take that risk, but it's a hollow courage, right? Not a hallowed courage, because the cause makes all. Lieutenant Bradley Snyder, who gave me some great thoughts as I was writing my book on courage, not just an American hero, but an incredible Paralympic athlete. He said, look, it's not just about throwing yourself on the grenade. It matters if you're throwing yourself on the grenade to protect someone else, right? If doing that will save someone else, otherwise it's right? How and why? The cause makes all. Cicero says that the Stoics define courage as the virtue which champions the cause of the right. No one has attained true glory. Courage ultimately This is John Lewis. John Lewis, our great singer. Well, he's arrested many, many times in the pursuit of civil rights. Beaten many, many times. I think he's arrested as a kid. He's beaten almost to death. If there was anyone that had cause for justification to be bitter, to be cynical, to doubt, to question what America was or what America could become, it would be this man, because he experienced the fall firsthand. Imagine being beaten nearly to death at times of and that's what he experiences. And yet, he's not bitter. In fact, he was always hopeful. This is Elwyn Wilson, who beat him to death nearly in that bathroom, who decades later, as John Lewis became a congressman, looked in his soul and decided that he knew he was wrong, and he was going to own it, and he was going to meet John Lewis in person. John Lewis was brave enough to meet him in person, but braver still to forgive and accept him. And he would write in Elwyn Wilson's book, as it happens, Elwyn's name is Hope. John would write, with faith and hope keep his eyes. idea of faith and hope, of not giving in, of continuing to believe is everything. There's a lot that can make us cynical. This is the first black graduate, U.S. Naval Academy, Wesley Brown. He's in the class with Jimmy Carter. They run cross country together. It's unfair to say that he's the first graduate. It almost diminishes the severity and for people like him, that he is the first person, the first black man to be Alaska graduate. Ready, set, almost every single day. Because he wasn't set up for success, but he persevered through it. He made it. This is Elizabeth Ann Rowe, first woman graduate. Both of these men, you can look at American history and press, be disappointed, cynical, skeptical, disgusted. But it's more than that. It's easy to do that. It's easy to criticize, it's easy to doubt, it's easy to say that it's systemic and it's impossible and a lost cause. But where would we be if we had done that? Where would we be if any of the people we're talking about indulged in that, right? Hope is the most important thing. Napoleon said, battles are more often lost by the abandonment of hope than by loss of blood. The hope is that key force that drives us forward, that allows us to continue. And I would agree, the world is a scary place. There's not that many causes for hope. And yet, we can also look at the past. We can look unflinchingly at what we've gotten wrong or where we screwed up, and find hope in the people who persevered through that, despite it. We didn't lose hope. We kept going. It's easy to say it's hopeless, but where would we be if we did do that? It's easy to give in to darkness, but where would we be if we did that? Where would we be if everyone gave up? Certainly that wouldn't make anything better. Nicholas Mosley, the novelist, he says there's a subject nowadays which is taboo in the way that sexuality once was taboo, which is to talk about life as if it had any meaning. I quoted Longfellow earlier. My favorite poem, The Psalm of Life, he says, life is real, life is earnest. I think the best people are real and earnest and hopeful and believe in something, believe in the future. Even thinking about being your best, right? To say, just always do your best. That feels cliche, it feels a little bit lame, it feels like something your 6th grade soccer coach would tell you. That's the point. It is a little cringe, but you have to be earnest, you have to actually believe it, because the world is changed by those people, not the people who cynically denigrate that exact idea. You cannot give up hope. With faith and hope, as John Lewis said, keep your eyes on the prize. Whatever that prize, whatever that destiny is for you, I cannot say, but you have to keep your eye on that. You have to believe in your ability to make that real. After January 6th, I sent an email to General Mattis, who I've gotten to know as a student of the Stoics. He carried Marcus Aurelius with him all over the world on all his different deployments. And I said, what's going on? And he said, hang in there, it's always darkest before the dawn. And then he caught himself and he said, although my friend John McCain would remind me that sometimes it's darkest right before it gets even darker. But he said, hang in there, it's always darkest before the dawn. And I thought, considering all the things he has seen in his decades of service, all the dark places all over the world, if he still has hope, what excuse do I have? And I said that to him, and then he replied with a note that I thought I would leave all of you with. To me, it is the mark of courage. It is what this country, the free world, needs all of you to carry forward with. He says, keep the faith, hold the line, physically, morally, in all forms of courage. Keep the faith, hold the line. Thank you very much. It's been an honor. Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
From the class of 2024, I'll mention it.
Oh, I gotta open it? All right. Like the 4 virtues, the cardinal points of the compass, point us in the right direction. This is lovely. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Good evening, sir. My name is Mitch Smith, third class son. I'm in 27th company. My question for you, sir, is do you think that the military today incentivizes courage?
I think we'd like to think that it does, but it doesn't always. I interviewed Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman on my podcast a few months ago, and I was dismayed at the number of people with military dresses who wrote in to criticize him for his decision to become a whistleblower. And I said, look, you don't have to agree with the choice, but why don't you challenge the most powerful man in the world first, and then come back to me and tell me that that wasn't the right decision to do. Right? So I think the problem is we like whistleblowers after the fact. Like, not immediately after the fact, but like decades after the fact. But at the time, in not just the military, but in all forms of public life, we disincentivize whistleblowers. We challenge them, we question them, we criticize them, we threaten them, we take away their jobs, as happened within them, right? We inflict collateral damage on families. We do not make it easy for people to do it, but you know, someone pointed out to me, I read this great book called about whistleblowers a few years ago, and he points out that the right, the protections for whistleblowers are enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, specifically because during the Revolution they wanted to catch and punish war profiteers, people who were defrauding the U.S. government. So this goes back to the very beginnings of American history, the need for protections and incentives for whistleblowers, because we do not naturally protect them and support them the way that we want to.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Yes.
Michigan third class Ian Crossy.
Hi.
My question for you tonight is about your September 19th presentation on the Daily Stoic.
Okay, I don't have them all memorized. You guys tell me what's in there.
You talk about adapting to new information and changing your path when you receive new information. And you say, don't let yourself be a prisoner to determination. So what's the difference between adapting and living?
Yeah, that's a great question. Marcus Aurelius in Meditations, he says, when someone points out that I am in error, they are not harming me, they are doing me a favor. Because why would I want to be wrong? But it often happens that because we are determined, because we have courage or belief in ourselves, because we feel like we've done the work, it becomes hard for us when we are attacked or criticized to filter that through the lens of these people are trying to help me. We get defensive, right? We get aggressive because that's worked for us so many times. I found this with entrepreneurs I work with. You wouldn't be a successful entrepreneur if you listen to the odds, right? If you listen to the conventional wisdom, if you listen to all the people who told you it wasn't going to work and it was a big mistake. The problem is that you internalize from that, never listening to feedback, never listening to criticism. Sometimes people aren't haters, they're trying to prevent you from driving off the cliff, right? And so it becomes a really difficult skill or balancing act between, when are you incorporating feedback, when are you changing, when are you adapting, and then when are you holding an important line, right? And that tension is quite difficult. But I think if you can accept that, we have this crazy thing in America where we punish politicians for changing their mind. Well, it's only a bad thing if their mind shouldn't have been changed, right? If the issues they were, incorrect before, we want them to change their mind. So that is that challenge, and the problem is the trait, our determination, our commitment, our fierce belief in what we think is right, can be a disadvantage when it comes to changing our mind or integrating new information.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Hello.
Michigan third class Ralston, 22nd company. So, while reading through Stoicism for our ethics class and for personal development reasons, I found it's very common to see a trend of Stoicism when you're down and hit when you're struggling to get back up. Can you present how it can be applied once you do start to get things moving, once you're in a positive mindset, once you start to get your life realistic?
So you can imagine the two big Stoics. Epictetus, he's a slave. He's as disempowered, as difficult of a situation you could possibly imagine. And Marcus Aurelius is as privileged and as powerful as you can imagine. They're both studying the same philosophy. Because to me, Stoicism is about keeping an even keel despite the fluctuation in one's circumstances. So Marcus Aurelius says the key is to accept it without arrogance and let it go with indifference. So you let the bad things go with indifference and you accept the good things without arrogance. That's the tension, right? What I love about Stoicism is that it's a philosophy, you've struck out 50 times in a row and you say that doesn't matter, I'm putting it out of my mind, and then what happens when you hit a Grand Slam and win the World Series and everyone tells you you're the greatest person that ever lived, right? Can you also tune that out and come back to the teachings, come back to the rhythm? You need the ability to sort of not be changed by external circumstances, good or bad. And I would hope, and I would venture to guess, most of what you will experience will be that one, the positive one. How do you not let ego creep in, success creep in, is just as important as not letting adversity and pessimism doubt.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Hi.
Mitchum, third class Marine. Sir, how do we best educate those who lead in Stoic philosophy and habituate such practices?
You know how we teach it?
Yes, sir.
By example, ultimately, right? Marcus Aurelius says, let us waste no more time talking about what a good man is like, let's be one. Epictetus says, don't talk about your philosophy, embody it, somewhat of attention, and given that my job is to write about it. But, right, I have to model it at home, I have to model it in my work, I have to model it in my life as a human being. The best way to teach Stoicism is to be Stoic under good and bad circumstances, to be the kind of person that other people want to be like.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, sir. Mitchum in third class, Ryan, 26 Company. I was wondering what you think the one single greatest action we can take to combat cynicism, which I feel like many others is rampant in our ranks.
I think it goes back to my answer to the other question, which is how do you model it? How can you be an earnest, good, and decent person who upholds these ideas, who models these ideas? There is the expression that courage is contagious. I think belief and meaning and decency and earnestness is just as contagious as courage. Unfortunately, cynicism is probably the most contagious, right? It's a virus like COVID that can run through the ranks, and it tends to be self-fulfilling, right? When you don't believe in anything, it's hard to find anything to be meaningful. It's hard to hold yourself to a high standard. It's then easy to justify doing the kinds of things that when people hear about engender cynicism and doubt and disillusionment. So I think the Stoics would say, what's in our control, right? Ultimately, what's in our control is the attitude that we bring. Voltaire says the most important decision that you can make is the decision to be a good people, right? The decision to wake up with a cheerful face, to face it all, to do the right thing, to ignore all the other noise out there is a powerful and I think transgressive statement in today's world.
Thank you, sir. Mitchum in third class, Sing, 26 Company. Sir, being an expert on Stoic philosophy, I was wondering if you personally see any weaknesses or errors in Stoic philosophy, or is it actually infallible?
If you think it's infallible, it ceased to be a philosophy and it's become doctrine and that's to miss the point. I mean, first off, the Stoics were writing 2,000 years ago, so they missed our advances in neuroscience and biology and psychology. I would like to think, to go to Seneca's point about reading like a spy and stamp and book, I would like to think they would have adapted and changed and evolved, and that's why I feel no compunction about integrating those things into my life today, whether it's going to therapy or reading the latest research from this school or that school. But we don't know that, right? It is a 2,000-year-old philosophy that was a product of its time and place, a time when slavery was rampant, a society that was very stratified, that was not much in the way of agency or change, that Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius both accept slavery and dictatorship without questioning it is, I think, a problem. So I want to see Stoicism as dynamic and fluid, but we don't know how it will change over time. And I think that's somewhere where we can improve it. That's somewhere where we can add to it. It doesn't have to be a static thing. We don't have to read Stoicism as a textual originalist. We can adapt and change it. But I think the biggest weakness is the one that Professor Sherman was talking about, that I see as a stereotype about Stoicism, this sort of lowercase, emotionless, robotic Stoicism that doesn't feel anything. We have examples of Marcus Aurelius crying. He left his wife. I mean, he had like 12 kids. It was.
怎么拿一点点？要赚钱啊，卖卡片。
是要赚钱啊，但是我就知道你要注意安全，对吧？被人家知道
那你开车去。
被人家那一整个抢走了，你有什么办法？那2-3个人呢合起来呢，把你抢走了。
Jimmy Carter, who does their best and tries to make the world a better place, whether they hold office or whether they're not in office.
他一般什么时候做呢？
一般今天有，但是今天我没做卖东西。
But I also understand that I'm combating a certain stereotype or impression of Stoicism that isn't quite accurate, but has existed for a very long time. Thank you, sir. Thank you all very much.
I hope you like this video. I hope you subscribe. But what I really want you to subscribe to is our daily Stoic email. 1 bit of Stoic wisdom, totally for free to the largest community of Stoics ever in existence. You can sign up at dailystoic.com/email. There's no spam. You can unsubscribe at any time. I love sending it. I've sent it every day for the last 6 years. I hope to see you there at dailystoic.com/email. You can't be satisfied